No matter what Europe or the developed world do to their environment or whatever they live in or whatever do to themselves or whatever for their beauty or whatever they do, and they leave the rest to perish, it will come to them. It will come hunting them. It will be a burden on them, and they will know it. If it's not, it will happen gradually. They will be surprised, and they will see how necessary it was. And I'm sure they see it now. You see, most of the time when any development or progress in the world, they try to reach out to other places and do it because they know at the end of the day, the problem will fall back onto them. So they go there and solve the issue. It's something which is the natural laws of life. You can't fool them. You can't fool the natural laws of life. These are things that are, it's common sense will tell you. You don't need a divine inspiration to tell you. You don't need God to come and tell you that. You will know. You will just know it. So this is my video, and this is the view I wanted to put out in this video. And I guess I've done my best to put a lot out there. There wasn't much spoken of the Bible regarding when we got to Genesis 12, which talks more of the things about what do you call it? It talks much about Abraham being asked to go out of his country, and that's God's promising him. And Abraham did that, and he went with his wife, and Abraham, stayed for a long time without no child, until Abraham ended up having children with Sarah, but through the same promise. And this Abraham is a man of God. Another issue that I can bring up. And his wife had to suggest to him that God has promised us. He has promised you. And there's no child or something. So go and have child with my maid. They had maid at that time. So he told him, go and have child with my maid. And my maid will have a child, and that child will be mine, and I'll take it as mine. And I don't know the idea where it came from, that why the woman did that. And Abraham also listened to the wife. He says, okay, I want a child. Maybe that is how God wants us to have the child, because we've stayed and waited for a long time. God promised me a child. He's not giving me the child. So maybe that is how God wanted me to have the child. You see, Abraham was just using his mind or his sort of... If God says he'll give you a child, he's a human being. There he is. He's not thinking, and maybe that is how God wanted to give me a child. He wanted me to sleep with my maid. My wife will suggest it, and I'll sleep with my maid. That's the man way of thinking, because he doesn't know at that time which way that God... I don't know his concept of God or at that time was his definition of God. So we can't tell. But that is what the story is saying here. And Abraham went into the maid, slept with the maid, had sex with the maid of a wife, and had a child called Ishmael. And he named the child Ishmael. We're bringing the child up together, and the maid became so insolent and so disobedient and so disrespectful of her own madam, because now he has slept with the master of the house. He has slept with Abraham, just like the man you sleep with, she has also slept with the same man you are sleeping with. So what makes you madam or anything, and you don't even have a child? I was able to have a child, able to give you your husband a child. So the plan that they had didn't work out. It didn't work out very well for Sarah. So Sarah had to be very upset, and I think something happened. It was after this incident that Sarah had somebody visited them. 3 people, they said 3 people, that Abraham was sitting somewhere, and 3 men visited them, and in the form of them seeing it as a form of God's angels. And I think somewhere that's how the promise all came, somehow. That's how the promise came in the first place, before this incident all came about. And one day after let me get it right. The 3 people visited them, gave them that promise. That is when there was an issue, I think, with Lot somewhere. Abraham's brother or cousin stuck somewhere in Sodom and Gomorrah, having issues there or something like that. And 3 people had to come to Abraham and Sarah to sort of, in the process when they were travel around, Lot, the cousin or the son to his brother Nahor or something like that, had a child. We might read through it, don't worry. But if you read the story, you get the gist of it. And this guy had to take some part to go and live there. And where he was living, he had issues there where the people there were having, sexual intercourse in a way that God, according to the Bible, God didn't like it. They say men were sleeping with men, women with women, and they were just messing about with the sex life. And so somehow God didn't like that. God wanted to God went there to destroy it. But he passed through the house of Abraham before he went. And then he promised Abraham to have a child. And Sarah even heard it and laughed. And he said, why is your wife laughing? He doesn't believe what I'm saying. That is true. Now these men were talking to Abraham. Now Abraham then thought that these men were, prophets at that time. I don't know, strangers are being considered as spirits of God. I don't know. But that's how it happened. And so when later, as it wasn't happening, then Sarah had to suggest to his what do you call it? His husband to sleep with his maid to have a child Ishmael, and they called it child Ishmael. And he became insolent. But before that, the story will tell you that Abraham was traveling through the place, and settled somewhere, and he went to some place like another town. It's a whole lot of stories. And he met this one of the king, and because of Sarah being beautiful, he had to lie to the king, tell her that Sarah was his sister or something like that. Before the king will end up, is that I think something of that nature, where the king inquired of Sarah to be, because if he knows that he's married to the Sarah, and Sarah is so beautiful, the king will kill Abraham. And so Abraham doesn't want to die. Of course he doesn't want to die. So he said, he told his wife to tell the king that he is his brother. And realistically, he is his brother because he's his cousin. They married to cousins, so he's his somehow cousin. He's a brother to him in some sense. So it's not really a lie, but the story suggests that he made that suggestion because even if his brother is married to him, but he didn't want them to know about the marriage part, or not the marriage, the unionship part, that he has been blessed with him. They two share life together. And the king even gave Abraham lots of ornaments and all kinds of nice things. Presented those things to Abraham because he said his sister is very nice, and he sort of wanted to sort of be with his sister because so he gave Abraham order. Abraham took those things, I think, all the way, but he was still afraid to accept Sarah to be his wife, not for the king's sake, the king's anger or the king's, But lo and behold, the king was not actually that type or that kind of person. But from a distance, they knew it was at those times. I think that was what was happening. So this story happened way before that, So Sarah had to admit to all these things, and the king had to find out some way that he's his husband. And he gave him that. Why do you lie to me? You know he's your companion. If you hadn't known, I would have ended up, sleeping with her, and she completely belongs to you, and that would have been wrong, and maybe your God would have been angry with me. That's wrong thing for you to do, and all that. And that story passed. Somehow Abraham moved on with lots of things. That's how Abraham was acquiring his properties and things that he was getting through all these things. That story part.